Good morning to everybody from Catalonia, and welcome to the online debate, Challenges and Opportunities of 5G for Rural Areas. This is the 7th event of the DIPLOCAT Digital Talk series that we launched in 2020 to analyze the world after COVID-19. First, I would like to thank the delegations of the Catalan government to the EU and Switzerland for the collaboration in this debate. In addition, a special thanks to the speakers and the moderator for accepting our invitation to participate in the event. As you might know, at DIPLOCAT, we build bridges between Catalonia and the rest of the world. We facilitate the exchange of people, ideas, and projects. We do it with tools such as international debates like this one. The aim is, above all, to share knowledge and exchange good practice among international actors on the strategies to follow in the immediate future. We want to add value to share European and global problems by generating a common story and a strategy with other international actors in order to face these challenges. DIPLOCAT is a public-private consortium made up of 38 entities, and around a third of these are local actors. This group is one of our fundamental pillars. These include the 2 municipal associations of Catalonia, the General Council of Aran, the 4 Catalan provincial councils, the city councils of Barcelona, Girona, Lleida, Tarragona, and Viella and Mitjaran. One of the topics of their interest is the opportunities generated because of the COVID-19 pandemic for sparsely populated areas. A pandemic which has generated a new and unexpected context in which technology is playing a relevant part. We will probably not be talking about the opportunities of remote working and companies opening away from big metropolitan areas without all the improvements and innovations tech has brought to our daily lives in the last few years. 5G is the next big thing in technology, which is being implemented now, and it will certainly have an impact on the way we work and live. The range of advantages of this technology goes far beyond its great speed and capacity. It is developing because of the competitiveness it offers, but most of the tests all over the world are taking place in urban areas due to the requirements for 5G cell towers to be close to one another. Does this leave room for rural areas to take advantage of what 5G offers? We will see if today we find out the answer to this and also to other questions. This is the last of our DIPLOCAT talks until autumn. New ones around other topics will be organized. So I invite you to stay tuned by following our Twitter profile @CataloniaPD or our profile on LinkedIn. Also, remember you can ask your questions to the panelists through the chat room on YouTube. Having said that, all that is left for me to do is to wish you a very fruitful and rich debate. And now, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Sergi Figuerola, who will introduce the first speaker and will moderate the debate. Dr. Figuerola is the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at DIPLOCAT since May 2013 and founder member and CTIO of 5G Barcelona. For the last 20 years, he has acted as project coordinator, technical manager, and work package leader in several European Commission research projects. His main research interests are related to 5G, new architectures, future internet, new space, and open innovation. He has more than 50 published papers. Sergi, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this introduction. Well, today we have a set of panelists. Basically, just to give you an idea, I mean, it's a moment of change. I mean, as Mrs. Foraster said, the range of advantages that 5G technology brings goes far beyond its speed and capacity. And the challenge that we have is to be sure that the deployment and I would say achievement of the 5G is not creating a new digital divide. It's a big challenge that we have because it's not that easy, or I would say There are not the instruments yet that facilitate that the rural areas have the same level, I would say, of importance as urban areas have for the telecom operators. So today we will have a great debate on this topic. There are many challenges to face. Actually, I would say that I have been one of the lucky persons that had the chance to assist to the Mobile World Congress this week, which finalized yesterday. Actually, I would say that was a talk yesterday discussing about rural areas with different experts. And some of the questions that were raised at the Mobile World Congress basically were related to the fact that which are the key issues on rural areas, deployment of 5G. So here we have the network cost. It's definitely a key issue. We have, they were saying that 45% of the population is still in rural areas, so the big gap is huge. And when we are discussing about this, there is what they call the coverage gap and the users gap. We also have a challenge on how we migrate users from phone technologies, the 2 generation that they still have, to the 5G generation. This is a jump of 3 generations, so it's not a question only of technology. We also have to let those people know what are the possibilities and the chances that this new technology offers. And altogether, I think that will be the topics that we will be addressing today. So we have 4 great speakers in our sessions. We have Dr. Robert Henkel, which is Senior Policy Advisor at the DG Connect European Commission, who will give a lecture after my introduction to give a global overview and the vision that also the European Commission may have on these topics. Later on the roundtable, we'll also have Mr. Xavier Flores, which is the 5G Secretary, belongs to the 5G strategy of Catalonia and belongs to the Department of Digital Policies. Then we will also have Mr. Thomas Stemmler, which is Head of IT Strategy, Networks and Infrastructure at Swisscom. And we'll, the last but not least, we'll have Dr. Marja Matinmikko-Blue, which is Wireless Communication Center of University of Oulu. So we have different people from, I would say, administration, from universities, from the private sector, that all together will provide a great view. Then to move forward, let me give some words to introduce Dr. Robert Henkel. So Dr. Robert Henkel initially was a researcher in the area of astrophysics between the 1984 and 1919. Between 1990 and 1995, he was a program and scientific officer of the German Federal Ministry of Research and Technology, and inter alia responsible for space, energy, and environment research policy. Between 1995 and 2000, he directly assisted the Deputy Director General of DC Research of the European Commission, the Director General of the Joint Research Center at the President of the European Parliament, and after that, he was an advisor for research policy in the Federation of German Industries, VDI, between 2000 and 2002. Further, he was as head of the sector responsible for planning and coordination of the communications activities in the Information and Communication Unit of DG Connect of the European Commission between 2002 and 2006. And between 2007 and 2012, he was seconded from DG Connect to the German government to develop the German broadband strategy and its implementation. Since 2012, he has been responsible for the broadband policy at DG Connect. So, Dr. Robert Henkel, the floor is yours, and we are just welcoming you and looking forward to your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this invitation and the opportunity to give a short overview about our connectivity policy, especially concerning 5G in rural areas. Can I see the first slide, please? Okay. I will start, and you can go to the next slide, with the general frame of our policy for the post-COVID era. You know, during the last months, we developed a new strategy for the digital decade with a policy target to bring 1 gigabit to all households in Europe and also 5G in all populated areas until 2030. This is a new target and very ambitious, as you know, but we have a good chance to reach it. The main idea is to develop a society with zero distance society concerning the internet connection. This has many levels. As you can see, there's the level to the IoT systems, and to the machine exchange of internet information, and on the very small local area until the large areas of pan-European cross-border backbones and 5G corridors, border crossing. And this means the geographic continuum is from the main corridors to the cities, to the local communities and villages and rural areas. It's really covering all areas of the European Union. And the target is especially concerning the industry and economic aspects, the vertical integration across the EU digital ecosystem. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here you can see the situation at the moment. For very high capacity networks, this means this is the addition of fiber to the premise and DOCSIS 3.1 cable connections. The rural coverage in 2020 was 28%, in contradiction to the total of 59% in total. This means this is gigabit, this is a gigabit connection. And you see the gap between the average coverage and the coverage in rural areas. A better situation is on the NGA coverage. This means minimum 30 megabit download. And there we have already 60% coverage in rural areas in comparison to 87 in total in average in Europe. If you look to the 5G coverage, we not so far developed. This is no surprise because the new technology, which is just starting to be deployed, we have 14% in average in Europe. And readiness, this means the main point here is to have finished the auctions for the spectrum frequencies we need to deploy 5G. We have in the moment 40%. Totally different, and there's no surprise situation for 5G. There's a coverage very high, 99.7% in average in Europe, and in, the take-up is 71%. This is the situation now. These are the effects of end of 2020. And so here you can see the already the problem and the gap between rural and not rural areas. And the reason for this gap is very clear. The deployment cost is not very profitable for private sector. In addition, we have also a mismatch of coverage and take up that you can see in the two figures of 5G. Mobile take up is only 71% in spite of the fact the coverage is already 99%. This means here's also a lack of demand, and this is mostly based off missing skills and education. And especially is the rural areas not so far developed concerning 5G, because 5G is mostly deployed in big cities or smaller cities, as a high populated area at the moment, not in rural areas. And so we have the targets, as I already mentioned, for 2025. This is the uninterrupted 5G coverage in all urban areas and all major touristic transport paths. And we have the new targets, which I have already mentioned, for the digital decade, which also covering 5G in all populated areas. And the main instrument to reach these targets, for 2025 and 2030, is on the one side, the public supported infrastructure investment, and on the other side, the sharing of knowledge to implement these investments. And now I will show you in the next slides how we will do it. First, the funding instruments for digital connectivity. Just on the one side, we have the new instrument of Selfdigital, where we have 2 billion state aid, or you can say public money for connectivity. but every time in combination also with InvestEU, the public bank loans, and also the European structure funds, which could be combined with the state aid money to build up rural connectivity, connectivity in rural areas. And this all is in the part of the general digital transition for a greener Europe, because also this is also a step to become greener in Europe, because in total a good broadband connection, a good internet connection could help to save energy and to make all the industry production more effective, energy effective, and so also greener. And it is the idea to have an inclusive Europe. This means also the people who should be covered by all the connectivity objectives I have already mentioned. Here again, all the coverage, all the targets for 25, also the 2025 targets are 100 megabits to all households minimum, upgrade able to 1 gigabit, 1 gigabit to all main socio-economic drivers. This means to schools, government, hospitals, and so on. And uninterrupted 5G coverage in all urban areas in major terrestrial transport paths. And the next further goals and objectives are for 2030 is gigabit for all households and 5G in all populated areas. Beside of the European funds I already mentioned, the state aid funds of 2 billion of Selfdigital and the European Public Bank, the European Investment Bank money in the context of InvestEU and the social funds. There's also, as you know, the big next generation EU recovery and resilience facility, which is now the planning is now finished by the member state, and there we have 20% reserved of the 750 billion euro only for digital area. And in the moment, there's around 50 billion of this 20% each member state could use for digital targets. In the whole Europe, 50 billion are planned by the member states for deployment of broadband, especially in rural areas. Next slide, please. To understand the new instrument Selfdigital actions, the 2 billion, here a short overview about the structure. The intention is to build up 5G corridors along transport paths, and also to build up backbones and submarine cables and operation digital platforms in combination also with energy and transport platforms. But for you, the most important is the 5G communities, because here we go in the rural areas and try to connect the rural areas with 5G. Next slide, please. Decoders, I will be very short because not our subject today. The main idea is to have an uninterrupted coverage of major transport paths. And you see here the map with the red, blue planned connection cross-border in Europe. It's mainly driven by private investment, but sometimes there's also market failure, and then we can use a blending of private money with this SEF2 status money, or including also the recovery funds money. Next slide, please. For you today, in our meeting today, the most interesting part is how we go to rural areas. You see the mere transport paths is mainly done in the urban areas by the private competition. But for rural areas, we have this gap problem as I described. Next slide, please. And here we starting with the service of general interest, this means the social economic drivers, which I have already mentioned. The public administration, health, education are the main customer, you can say, of this CEF2 money. And this is, in this situation, it is not state aid question, because if you invest public money for service of general interest, you don't need a proof by DG competition, because the service of general interest is not a state aid case. And they are connected with the cloud infrastructure, which will already, which have to be already existing, the backbone connection in rural areas, and which will bring also this connection to different objects of IoT devices. Next slide, please. The 5G communities are demand-driven. This means the different services of general interest or social economic drivers, more or less synonym names, other the government, schools, health, and should ask for this support. And we will support especially the 5G antenna and the connection with the antenna, but normally expected is that there's already a backbone already existing. This means we support in this program the connection between backbone and the 5G antenna and the 5G active elements in addition. And the funding could reach up to 75% of the whole cost for this deployment of 5G in rural areas. And we starting with best practice, which already exists, and deploy the knowledge about it. So, and the very important way to distribute this knowledge is the DCO network, also corporate competence offices, which you also have in Catalonia, high developed as I know. And there we have a network across whole Europe with nearly 120 PCO offices, also broadband competence offices on the national and regional level, who deploy the most current knowledge trained central by our facility here in Brussels into the regions. Next slide, please. Here the 5G companies pooling the resources, as I have already told. We can combine the Selfdigital resources with the RFF money, also the national, decided by the national governments using the recovery fund money. And there already exist 5G use cases to improve this service of general interest, or to service social economic drivers. And the whole distributing of knowledge should be stimulate also the digital supply chain and standards to the industry in rural areas. This means here the customer are mostly the smart agriculture and precision farming, and also the manufacturing, the 5.0 manufacturing and logistics in rural areas. There's also push for the indirect or direct push of the industry in these areas. But the first and most easiest to connected customer of this support will be the service of general interest, for example, the healthcare patient monitoring and assistance at home by hospitals. And there you can, this area is far developed, also concerning the technologies in Europe, pushed also by our research program, but also the national programs and the industry. And so we have here the chance to really save time, money, and energy. To visit a doctor or a hospital is not necessary if you have a good service in distance by internet. Another example is, for example, in rural areas, the disaster prevention, and or also the smart education and smart work environments in public administration of administration in rural areas. Next slide, please. Here you see the time frame. When you see the development of the 5G communities in the Selfdigital program, which could be combined with the recovery funds of the national programs. And our task here in Brussels will also to coordinate this combination and to help how to combine this kind of financing. And we will support you by the PCO network with best practice, also with the technical aspects and the reference architectures, for example, but especially with concrete best practice concerning business models, investment models, and partnership agreements. Here, our unit is very active. Because in our case, we ought to be managing by a subcontractor the 5G state aids money, and at the same time we also managing the 5G education and knowledge distribution by the PCO network. And so our unit is all these the two aspects are the financing and knowledge distributing combined. And so if you have questions, you can ask me or my colleagues. We have specialists for the different questions. State especially, for example, specialists. We have financing specialists. We have many different specialists who can help you. Next slide, please. The good example, and as you know, also Catalonia, we have, we can say, a kind of pilot. This was a Wi-Fi-for-EU initiative and program. This was also wireless connection like 5G, but on the other level, technical level. But we have good. This was also direct state aids for the communities by our unit, and we have awarded. Can you go back to the last slide, please? Can you? So not one slide before. We have covered now during the last years and 5 calls, 8,900 local communities with this Wi-Fi-for-EU connection. As we supported with, as you know, with 50,000 euros the building up of the mast and the antenna. And at the moment now already 5,500 rollouts are completed. Means during the next years we will have at the end the 8,900 roads completed. And here you can see also the good experience you have by this not so high developed can say technology Wi-Fi-for-EU. It's not gigabit connection, but we have the experience to connect hospitals and schools. You can see 37.5% of all these connections are covered by hospitals and 80% by schools already. And so we have this experience of the last year and can transform this experience or can use experience for 5G for EU, for the new 5G community support in a similar way. Last slide, please. Thank you very much for your patience, and I hope I was clear in my description, but I'm still open for questions the whole meeting. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Henkel, thank you very much for this wide view of what are the strategies beyond and how challenges are being covered. Actually, you have been talking about infrastructure and technology, business models, what happens with the spectrum, key applications, and last but not least, which is the easy investment and support in order to be sure that Europe is properly covered and there is no digital divide in between. So thank you very much for your all. So we will keep the questions for the roundtable afterwards, in order to be sure that we can smoothly move on the roundtable. So now I will move forward and I will introduce the next speakers that we have in the session. So I welcome Xavier Flores. Xavier Flores is a telecommunications and electronics engineer with more than 20 years of experience in innovation projects based on wireless communications. And for more than 10 years, he has been working in the Catalan government on various projects related to mobile communication services. Since 2019, he's the coordinator of the Catalan government's 5G strategy for Catalonia, and he's deeply involved on the 5G rural strategy that the Catalan government is following up. Welcome, Xavier. So next speaker is going to be Dr. Marja Matinmikko-Blue. So I hope I pronounced well, Marja. Dr. Marja is a 6G flagship research coordinator and senior research fellow at CWC, University of Oulu. So it's good that you are already one of the panelists working on 6G, because it means that you already have a global view of 5G and implications and so on. So we'll bring lots of value to the discussion. You are also adjunct professor at the University of Oulu. So you have been conducting multidisciplinary research on technical, business, and regulatory aspects of mobile communication systems in close collaboration with industry, academia, and regulators. You have coordinated several national research projects and consortia, and you have published more than 150 scientific papers. Also, you are the coordinator and the preparation of the 12 6G white papers in 6G flagship, and led the development of the white paper on 6G drivers and the UN in SDG. So welcome, Marja. Well, let me add something that you also have on the CV, which is very much important. So you have been focused on the development of new local 5G operator concepts to allow different stakeholders to deploy on networks in geographically confined premises or rural areas. This is key for today's discussion. Then the last but not least, Thomas introduced Mr. Thomas Stemmler. So Thomas has worked his whole professional career in the telecommunications business with a focus on mobile networks. In Germany and Switzerland, he participated in the boom times of the mobile communications with establishment of 2G, 3G, and 4G networks for various mobile operators, which means that it's a long experience and understanding which is the impact when there is a new jump of a new technology. Joining Swisscom, the leading Swiss telco in 2016, he developed the 5G strategy and obtained recently the responsibility for the strategy for networks, infrastructure, and IT, which is very much important also for today's discussion. And he's looking for solutions to address the telco challenges, exploring new business models and offering with new innovative technology to enable new growth. So welcome, Thomas, too. So well, we have 3 excellent speakers, so I will follow up with some questions to all of you. And feel free if you want to add something to the questions of the other panelists. What I would only request you is please to be sharp, clear, because the time is finishing and we have to be sure that we are on time on the whole session. So I will start with Xavier Flores. Xavier, could you briefly tell which is the Catalan government, what you are doing to implement a 5G strategy, and how is this strategy applies to the rural world with, I would say, sparsely populated areas, and what are the objectives aimed with this strategy?
Okay, thank you, Sergi. And first of all, I want to thank the DIPLOCAT for inviting us to this virtual debate. And Sergi, with your permission, before talking directly about the 5G strategy of Catalonia, let me briefly talk about the 5G technology. In this sense, firstly, what we may have is to ask ourselves what has the 5G technology that makes it deserving of the Catalan government to create the 5G strategy of Catalonia. Well, as you know, 5G is the first generation of mobile telephony as before 3G and 4G, and each new generation of mobile telephony includes a set of features that make it better than the previous generation. However, 5G, due to the features it provides, which can be summarized in 3, much wider bandwidth, much lower latency, and a capacity to manage up to 1 million devices per square kilometer, make it a technology with a clear disruptive character that previous generation of mobile telephony did not have. And these 3 features will impact all the social and economic activities in mobility that we can imagine now. It's because of these three characteristics that 5G provides that we, the Catalan government, considered that the 5G and its deployment were clearly government priority and a priority for Catalonia. Thus, the Catalan government created the 5G strategy of Catalonia, which was approved in 2019 and was presented at the Mobile World Congress of the same year, 2019. The 5G strategy of Catalonia includes a whole set of action activities around 5 axes: promotion, infrastructure, innovation, ecosystem, and talent. And within the axis of innovation, it's include as an important, very important action for us, the creation of what we call 5G areas throughout Catalonia, especially in less populated and rural areas. We have currently created 6 5G areas around Catalonia, and after the summer, we will present the last 2 5G areas we are working on to complete the entire deployment of the 5G areas throughout Catalonia. Well, on what exactly are these 5G areas? Each area is a territory. All the areas, they are territorial areas with a geographical extension of approximately half of what we, the provinces are. And what we do with each 5G area is to contact with the main agents to each 5G area, that is public entities, business associations, research centers, etc., with the aim of identifying, firstly, which are the priority business vertical for each specific 5G area, according to its circumstances, such as processed food sector or health or energetic sector or mobility, etc. And the identification of these priority business verticals aims to adapt to these business verticals all the different activities and initiatives that will be developed in each of the 5G areas, and work on and focus on identifying the main agents of this business vertical that can help us identify the main challenges and needs of this business verticals, and how, for example, through specific workshops for these verticals, we can find new products and services based on 5G that solve these specific challenges and needs, reaching their implementation as pilots or use cases. And another very important aspect is that for each 5G area, we ensure space with 5G NSA coverage, which we call 5G laboratories, so that the whole ecosystem of the 5G area of this priority verticals, but also of the rest of the business verticals, they can go there to these nearby 5G labs to test their products and services based on 5G technology, while these companies do not have 5G coverage in the municipalities where these companies are based. The goal of all of this is, as we say, that each of the 5G areas, and in fact, that the whole territory, start thinking in 5G mode in order to analyze the specific challenges and needs that they have, and work on new 5G-based products and services that address directly these challenges and needs. Thus, when the deployment of 5G arrives to these territories of each of the 5G areas, the implementation of these 5G-based products and services will be immediate, because we will already have had time to work on these 5G-based solutions. And in this way, what we achieve is to gain a lot of months by previously working on these new 5G-based products and services before the deployment of 5G reaches the territories.
Perfect.
Regarding yeah.
No, go.
Sorry?
If you can just take 1 minute more, please.
Just a moment. Yes, less 1 minute. Regarding to the type of partners that participate in the strategy of 5G areas, these are entities representing the whole 5G area, both the public sector and the business sector of the different priority verticals of each of the 5G areas, as well as ICT companies, which can work on the new 5G based solutions. And we also identify research centers and citizen representation entities. And to finish, in this sense, during all the year in each 5G area, we hold sessions of dissemination of 5G technology where we meet all of these entities in order to ensure the knowledge of 5G technology.
Thank you, Xavier. So it's great. Well, I know this strategy. It's very well implemented, and I'm very certainly that we will try to do our best in Catalonia to move forward with it. So thank you very much for your comments. So if I move to the next panelist, if I go to Dr. Marja. So I mean, one of the biggest challenges for 5G deployment in sparsely populated areas is the need of dense network of 5G cell towers. So as you have been carrying out research in rural areas in Brazil in the past, where the mobile network is weak or there is no mobile network at all, what do you think are the solutions that can be provided for these areas to have proper network connectivity? Or could you tell us about your approach focused on local micro operators and what are the main challenges for these solutions? In the end, we all know that we have the big telecom operators, small ones. There is a big, I would not say fight, but I would say discussion about what happens with the spectrum, because the fact that maybe some on the spectrum, but they don't go to the rural areas, it's a problem. And I'm pretty sure that you can illuminate us on your ideas or experience. So the floor is yours, Marja.
Thank you, Sergi. It's a huge, big topic, and I'd like to share some insights that I've collected over the 20 years that I've been involved in this wireless communications domain, working in the academia, in the research sector all this time, but doing very close collaboration with the industry and the public sector, including the regulators in Finland, in Europe, and at the CTIO globally. So during this time, we are seeing a big change now, like the mobile communication ecosystem is changing. Until now, until 4G, we had the mobile network operators deploying the networks, getting licensed spectrum for nationwide networks from the national regulators, buying the equipment and the networks from the vendors and so on, and having the direct relation to the end customers. So the MNOs had the big role. So now what's happening in the past 5 years? So 5G has started, and all these new generations of wireless technologies, all wireless networks, their deployment fully depends on spectrum availability. So they use the radio airwaves. Spectrum is fully regulated at different levels, international, European, and national levels. Different regimes are there. And so what you can do and what you cannot do is strictly regulated as of today even. So when it comes to 5G, we've seen now the 5G spectrum awarding decisions taken by the national regulators. Like for example, inside the Europe and the EU, there are the 3 pioneering bands for 5G, 700 megahertz, 3.5 gigahertz, and 26 gigahertz. And if you look at them, they are totally different. There, if you look at from the engineering side, their propagation characteristics differ greatly. The available capacity, the bandwidth there in these 3 bands is totally different. So they are different resources altogether. And who gets access to these resources? That defines who can actually deploy any 5G networks. And now those decisions are being made in the different countries. Some have already given all the 3 bands, like Finland did that already. Others are in the process of making them available. And I've done research on the spectrum awards decisions for 5G globally, and there's huge divergence. Even inside the EU, the same bands are awarded through different national mechanisms. Auctions are often used, but even the auctions have different purposes. The national governments decide the goals for those market mechanisms auctions, and they either collect money or they don't collect that much money, but they value other things. So the whole goal is to maximize the efficiency of spectrum use and its benefits to the society, and these are interpreted quite differently in the different countries. And if you look at the rural areas, so if you go to these lower bands like 700 megahertz, 800, 900, they provide great coverage. They cover big areas. So those who have access to those bands, they can build very broad, very good coverage networks. And for example, in Finland, we have great 4G coverage operating in those lower bands, and we have shared networks. MNOs have built shared networks. So there are only 2 networks in the rural and remote areas with good connectivity. And then what happened with 5G, and in my own research with regulators and industry, we were talking about these local operator models. Local operators in addition to the mobile network operators. So we made this big claim 4 years ago that when it comes to 5G, different stakeholders should be allowed to deploy their own 5G networks. It should not be left only in the hands of the handful of big mobile network operators in every country. And it was a lot of objection to that idea. We had a national Finnish project bringing together academia, regulator, and industry working on that topic. And we were presenting these ideas 2017, and there's a lot of objection, but then the tide gradually changed, and now 5G spectrum is made available also locally. Mainstream is still to give it to the MNOs, mainly through auctions, but there are local spectrum licenses, especially in the higher bands, but there the coverage becomes very much limited. So this change has happened. So that's the regulation part, and every deployment of wireless networks depends on the spectrum availability in that specific spot. If you think about these local networks, there's huge demand right now for industrial networks in different factories, in different harbor areas, in different geographically constrained areas. And if you make spectrum available there, then like the spectrum availability in that specific location defines what kind of wireless connectivity you can do in that place. And there's a lot of divergence in that approach. The same is in the rural and remote areas. Who has the rights to use the spectrum in those areas? Only those and only them can deploy the networks. And then it comes to these decisions, who gets access to them. And then the big thing that we've done research for a very long time is spectrum sharing, shared access to this precious natural resource. So even if you have given the rights for somebody, but if they don't build a network in every area, if they don't use it, why should they still hold on to that spectrum? And that's the situation today. If you once get the rights, you hold on to that. And if you don't have obligations to build base stations in those areas, you don't have to, you just keep it, and no one else can use that. And that is what is now limiting this whole thing, that no one else can come and build that. But there the regulators are seeing this, and some countries are taking actions to make it possible. For example, the UK Ofcom is very advanced in making these bands available. If they're not used, then they should be made available. But there's a lot of the divergence in the approaches, and still the mainstream is not share. It's not to share, and that's the big change that I hope to see in the future. So it's a big technical regulation and business triangle. The business is all about business. If even today we could solve this rural and remote area connectivity problem, there is spectrum available in those lower bands. Operators can deploy networks there if it was economically feasible, if it made sense for them in the business sense. So only that is stopping the thing from happening to those stakeholders. Then other stakeholders typically cannot enter. So it really is a complicated situation, and the situations are different in different parts of even inside Europe, but not to mention when we go to Brazil, we had a joint EU-Brazil project and seeing what challenges there are. So it's a huge country, and there are different kind of challenges, even illegal transmitters there that we don't observe so much here. So it's not a one solution for all. 5G is not the only answer to here. The whole ICT system is so complex. It's complex because you can't see it. You can't see the airwaves. You can't even see the cables because they go underground. So it's huge, complex network system of systems. Even in this place, there are a lot of overlapping networks in this area providing the connectivity. So that's a brief overview of the complexity.
You have what we call open up the box of Pandora. I mean, what I mean with this is the fact that you are true on what you say, but I may remain some questions on top of you. You are talking that there are several options, but what we have to be sure is that, for example, at the European scale, we may have one vision. And to have one vision, you need to align the different countries to do the same. So here, one of the questions that could be afterwards to discuss is, who is the end responsible for that? Because we see different countries taking different decisions. Some of them may have vision and they foresee what is behind these actions to be sure that there is no digital divide in the country. Some others might not, and they make the action, and then it's too late to go back and decide what you do with the spectrum that already belongs to the private sector. So this is a key, so that needs to be maybe the holistic view. We have to know who is the last responsible, because it can not help on having Europe moving at the same speed. And here is where it's not just only the divide, also on what you were commenting on the rural and urban areas, but also on the digital divide between countries, those that were more visionary against those that were not attached, right?
It's a very complex setup, and it's an interplay between the stakeholders. Regulators have a key role, the Commission has a key role, and then the national regulators, and they do that all in collaboration.
Great, thank you. I think that Dr. Henkel had something to say, if I'm not wrong.
May I give a short comment?
Yes.
As you know, the new regulation, new code of European Union, let it open, and we are supporting spectrum sharing, supporting also the cooperation of different, and to open, not use the spectrum for other use. The European legal frame is very flexible and very constructive in the sense of really using the limited spectrum, and we try to also push governments, for example, during the auctions to use obligations, coverage obligations, means to prohibit the not using of the spectrum. Then there are some good examples, not only in Germany, there are many other examples where coverage obligation has a very strong effect. This means if you get a spectrum, you're obligated to coverage 80 to 90% of the rural areas. And this is a high pressure, we call it best practice, you can say, in Europe. But on the other side, we choose, the lady before me really described, this is the responsibility of the national regulator to implement the possibilities. We can get, our code is a frame, a legal frame, the European code and the European, but the national and regional governments are responsible to implement this legal frame and to use the possibilities. And so from our side, we have done the best we can do, and we're supporting the ideas the lady before me expressed, that to share spectrum and to make pressure on big players who have a spectrum and not using it. This is without doubt. But there is also national and regional responsibility, and especially concerning, you can say, this kind of misuse of spectrum. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you much for your insight. Good. So we'll continue, and now we'll welcome the next speaker, which is Mr. Thomas Stemmler. So now we will come into, I would say, the opinion of my NEO from the private sector. So Switzerland is the European continent with the largest deployment of commercial 5G. This coincides with the fact that it is the most mountainous country in Europe too. So what is the approach of Swisscom to provide 5G to rural and mountain areas of Switzerland outside bigger cities where the most of Swiss population lives? So what is the role of Swisscom plays in the digital Switzerland strategy? So Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergi. Unfortunately, I cannot start my video anymore, but do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We hear you.
So you have to just enjoy my voice. That doesn't matter. I don't have slides to show anyway. So let me start with, let's say, the frame conditions in Switzerland, which from my point of view have fostered a situation of a very good network quality without any public subsidies. So neither in the fixed network fiber deployment nor in the mobile deployment, the state have invested a single euro or Swiss franc. This is all private competition, and we have a very fierce infrastructure competition in Switzerland, and say it's in the interest of the operators to have the best network quality. For a long time, Swisscom was the only operator offering a good network quality, but now the two other private competitors have realized that only with a very good network quality you can gain a substantial market share, and that is leading to high investment levels in the networks, and that is happening not only in the urban areas where most of the money is to make, but also in the rural areas where, especially for the mobile networks, many customers are moving around. So they are not just sitting in the cities, but for leisure activities, they move into the mountains and expect very good network coverage there as well. Beside that, I think the regulation should foster investments in terms of access regulation. If you have to share the benefits of your investments with many others on wholesale agreements and so on, this is dampening the investment level, of course. So I think we have rather a liberal regulation regime on network access, which helped us to monetize our investments. There are some problems in regulation in Switzerland. I'm not aware of how this is in Catalonia or in Spain. Regarding 5G, we have a very strict electromagnetic field protection regime in Switzerland. This actually is you should not imitate. It's making it very difficult for us to upgrade 5G on existing sites and or build new sites with 5G, as there's a lot of fear in the population about health effects of 5G. The regulation doesn't help because we cannot really upgrade easily these sites. Nevertheless, the level of network coverage is already very high due to the competition pressure. In Switzerland, roughly half of the population is covered with 5G on the high band, on the 3.5 gigahertz, which is, I would say, the real 5G with the gigabit speeds. And around 96% of the population is covered with 5G on other bands, mainly the 2100 and the 700 band. And also the 4G coverage is excellent. You have almost the whole population is covered by 4G, and the area is covered by 97% of the area is covered by 4G. Yeah. So we start, let's say, with a very good starting conditions. We have good mobile networks. The question is, how did it work? Why have we invested in rural as well? Normally, everything is return on investment based from private investments. And as well with 5G, that happened, of course. We started in the cities. Currently, 50% in Switzerland means all the big cities, and then, let's say, the top 20 cities. We also started with 5G coverage on rural, let's say, railroads and motorways. But we also started to invest in rural areas, especially in the areas where we have a lot of tourism and, let's say, ski resorts, and the ways, the transportation ways to these resorts. Maybe to understand why all that happened is also that Swisscom is still owned by the state with a very small majority. So 50.1% is owned by the Swiss Federation. Of course, we also have to follow, let's say, strategic targets the state is giving to us. So we have, of course, we are playing a big role in the digital story of Switzerland and avoiding this digital divide between rural and urban areas. So politics have still a certain say into our, let's say, action plans. This is not very direct. So let's say we do not have a direct intervention, but let's say we have a strategic goal of the government to avoid this digital divide. Then in terms of regulation in rural areas, you must understand that around 7% or 7 to 10% of the Swiss population is living in rural areas, seen, let's say, from the network infrastructure. This is not only in the mountains, actually is to a lesser amount in the mountains. It's more the hilly terrains in between the cities where coverage is actually more difficult than in the mountains. To create. This is due to a line of sight and wave propagation, Actually, in the mountains, it's pretty easy to create good coverage because you can build an antenna, let's say, rather high. Whereas in the hilly terrains of rural areas, in the flatter areas is much more difficult because of forests and trees and whatever. So rural is not equal to mountain in Switzerland, I wanted to say, not only. From the regulation, we have a universal service obligation for broadband, and that's mainly fixed broadband, of course, in Switzerland today, obliging us to provide 10 megabit per second to all the endpoints. This is achieved already. Only around 4,000 to 5,000 customers have used that, let's say, regulated product for the universal obligation. So most of the customers can use normal commercial products. Now there's a political debate in Switzerland, and it will probably happen, that to lift this 10 megabits per second obligation to 80 megabit per second. So we would be obliged to deliver 80 megabit to everywhere where actually a household or a business is located, being it in the Alps on 3,000 or 4,000 meters, or being it somewhere in a cave. This is going to happen, and our approach to fulfill this is manifold, actually. First of all, we already have 90% covered with 80 megabit per second on fixed networks by the end of this year. So a large amount of that application is on traditional fixed net. This is hybrid fiber networks. It's fiber to the home, but also fiber to the building networks and fiber to the street, where typically we get up to 300 to 500 megabit per second. And then there's a residual value of around 7% of households where we do not achieve that with fixed network. And of course, a part of those households are also located in the mountains. Now, to close that gap, we use three different things. First of all, we talk about a technology we call bonding. So we combine a 5G, 4G network with the existing copper line network. So the modem actually gets two streams from the fixed net and the mobile network. And thus we achieve at least 80 megabit per second, but normally much more. Then if this is not possible due to missing coverage of the wireless network, we would use satellite connectivity. You can buy from companies like SAS or Eutelsat. You can buy a satellite connectivity and in a wholesale mode, and then offer it to your very let's say distant like mountain huts where there's even no power connection. You can serve with satellite. And the third one is actually pure fixed wireless. So where, let's say, the copper lines are very, very long and old, we replace them with fixed wireless, also based on 5G. So this is actually, let's say, the toolbox we have to create coverage in the mountainous areas.
Very good, Thomas. Yeah. I don't know if you have something else to add, but we should continue with the roundtable.
Yeah, maybe one last remark from the technical side. So why are we doing this bonding? I mean, when you provide good service quality, you need capacity, and in wireless, the capacity is shared in a cell, and so your quality depends on how many users are in the cell. And if you have, let's say, even if it's only 10 or 20 megabit per second on your fixed network, you shouldn't throw that away. Yeah? So the combination, for instance, you can use TV over the fixed net, and then to achieve the higher speeds, you use then the wireless part. So from our point of view, this is reasonable to reuse what is there in terms of fixed net capacity.
Good, Thomas. So thanks for your contribution. Actually, I mean, what I want to reinforce is the fact that now also due to the impact that we have had with the COVID and the fact that many people have started to be working remotely, is when it is even more important to be sure that the policies you are set are reaching the rural areas, to be sure that the feeling that they have working from a rural area is the same where they would be at the center of an urban city. And this is much value in the moment of the situation that we are nowadays, global in the world and Europe in particular too. And another topic that you raised is the fact that you said that the government is partially owning the Swisscom, which means that in the end here is something that will come up if we have time later on, is the fact that what is understood as a private-public partnership model, which I see as the key issue to be sure that we move forward on the deployment of these strategies and to be sure that the rural areas have 5G. Then also just another comment that you may raise, the fact that in 5G, right, it's not yet finished the implementation. The standards are being in place, which means that even though that the impact now is only on capacity, we will see very soon the impact that real time with the fact of low latency may bring, with massive communications impact. So new applications will come that will indirectly impact the users and the life of nowadays. So let's be sure that it happens also on rural areas. Thank you, Thomas. So we will move again to another question to Xavier Flores. I would ask now, please, to be sure that you can answer with 2-3 minutes, because we expect to finish at 11:40. So just to let the audience know. So please be sharp, more sharper than before, because we have 3 more questions and we should be able to finish. So I will try to interrupt you if it's needed. So Xavier, can you, regarding the Coebra lab in the Ribera d'Ebre project, can you especially, is an area of 150 kilometers south of Barcelona. So what do you pretend to achieve in this area with the center? So how will you push from the government point of view the fact that a project is happening in the rural area, and what are the opportunities that you foresee for the local residents, or what are the obstacles that you see?
Yeah, Coebra Lab is the 5G laboratory of the Terres de l'Ebre 5G area. That is a 5G area, like I just said, is located in the south of Catalonia, and where the main access of this territory is the presence of the Ebre River, which conditions absolutely all the economic and social activities and development of this territory. The Terres de l'Ebre 5G area was the first 5G area that we presented, and specifically on July 2nd, 2020. So with what today, exactly a year ago. In this 5G area, the 4 priority verticals identified were rural territory, agricultural, energy sector, and health. Well, the Catalan government had been working for years on the concept of what the 5G deployment model in a rural environment should look like. And in order to ensure that the 5G deployment in rural environment is carried out as quickly as possible. As you know, that the 5G deployment depends on mobile operators, which are the ones that buy the spectrum to the state, and they acquire deployment commitments in percentage of population coverage. Like previous generation of mobile telephony, the deployment of mobile operators begins in large cities and continues in the most populated areas, always remaining in the end of the most rural areas. Due to the disruptive nature of 5G, which I have already mentioned it above, regarding 5G, the Catalan government's priority is to reach the whole territory as soon as possible. And in this sense, analyzing the main aspects that make mobile telephony arrive late in rural areas, or directly they don't arrive. Perhaps the most important aspect is of course, the investment that mobile operators have to make. Thus, if we ensure that the investment that operators have to make in a rural location is low, obviously it will be easier for them to make the investment. In this sense, first of all, with the DIPLOCAT Foundation, that is a European reference research center in 5G located in Barcelona, we were working on analyzing how this share model of 5G deployment in rural areas could be, and a model that should be good, nice, cheap, and very efficient. And secondly, we needed a rural place to work on this 5G deployment model. And in this sense, the chosen place was the headquarters of Terres de l'Ebre 5G area, that is the Coebra Lab. In addition, this model of 5G deployment in rural areas will be worked on jointly with mobile operators. And in this sense, we are already working closely with Telefonica and Vodafone so that the COEBRA 5G lab will be the reference laboratory to analyze and implement the shared 5G deployment model in a rural environment. COEBRA 5G lab will also be the reference point for high capacity fixed wireless access connectivity testing to be able to bring broadband connectivity via radio to those towers where due to its orographic difficulty, it's not feasible to be able to reach with fiber. And in order to implement the COEBRA 5G lab, we have the collaboration also with different companies from the territory of Terras de l'Ebre, such as installation companies and fiber maintenance operators. And in addition, thanks to the fact that the COEBRA 5G lab will have 5G coverage, for example, the most important drone reference company in this territory will set up its headquarters in the COEBRA 5G lab in order to work in the fields of drones on 5G. And also another entities such as the TIC Salud Foundation of the Department of Health of the Catalan government will also create its 5G home care laboratory in the COEBRA 5G lab. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank the involvement of the local leader of the Terras de l'Ebre 5G area, the Ribera de Ebre County Council, which has been involved since day one in the creation of the COEBRA 5G lab. And regarding the obstacle, you said, you mentioned it, Sergi mentioned it, especially in relation to working on the 5G shared deployment model in rural areas. The main obstacle was to achieve the close collaboration of mobile operators in order to work on a model with their approval and to which they would be willing to connect. In this sense, as I have already mentioned, we have reached an agreement to work with them jointly on this model, and it has been a very, very important aspect. The second aspect to note is, of course, the budget needed to implement the 5G deployment in a rural environment. And here, Next Generation EU funds play a determining role. We are currently analyzing how these funds will be distributed to deploy 5G in rural areas. And in this sense, and at the Spanish level, our bet is that regional governments, such as the Catalan government, which directly manage these funds, because of our knowledge of the territory and all the alliances we already have with the main entities representing the territories. And we are a Catalan government, which are the ones to bid for the contracts, to build the towers, to arrive with fiber to the towers, and as well as the investment in the hardware needed to install in the towers to be able to give 5G service. And in this sense, the Spanish state plans to allocate 2 billion euros of the Next Generation EU funds to aid for the deployment to 5G to reach 75% of the population by 2025. And finally, to finish, and in short, we see that the COEBRA 5G lab is the example and the reference of what we want to happen in the rest of the 5G areas around Catalonia. That is to create 5G laboratories in the territory where companies of the territory can test their products and services based on 5G technology before the 5G technology arrives to the territory, and create a 5G ecosystem in each 5G area that works on how 5G can help resolve all the different challenges and needs associated, especially in rural areas.
Thank you very much. We have a very good insight of the project initiative and the support that you're getting, and also about the barriers that are in the path, which are always complex to overcome. Good. So let me add here an opinion from Marja. So what is your opinion on the main challenges that your research in Brazil would face if it were to be implemented in Europe? Or how do you think that we could implement solutions for efficient 5G networks in sparsely populated areas? So do you have any specific idea of what is if exists the PPP model that should be applied? Does it make sense to have one, several? Or last but not least, taking into account the considerations that we all know so far about 6G, do you think that we'll have similar debate when 6G arrives? Or we will be mature enough and all these things will be overpassed and new technology is coming and that's all? Thank you.
Great questions, and 6G research has started. 6G flagship hosted by the University of Oulu was the world's first 6G research program, started 3 years ago. Now globally, similar initiatives have started, and we are looking at the future 10 years ahead. So 6G is aiming at deployments in 2030, and that year is the same year, target year for the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And what now is a common agreement within the 6G domain, including researchers and industry, is that the sustainability sustainability is the key driver for the development of the next generation of systems. The technology, but also the deployment models, the business models. So it should be sustainable in terms of economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and all these aspects of sustainability. And meeting those goals, those 17 SDGs, there's 169 individual targets. They address all aspects of the sector, of the society, all sectors of society, health, industry, and everything. And they'll meet very stringent sustainability requirements, which simply cannot be met without widespread adoption of ICT technologies and especially wireless technologies. And there the equality becomes a big thing. So if you only have these solutions available in the major cities and big cities, it's not enough, but you have to ensure that those solutions are available in the remote and rural areas. So I see a big movement now towards realizing that what sustainability really means in the development of the future wireless systems, more than ever before in the previous generations of mobile communication networks. It definitely calls for new deployment models, new public-private partnership models, new business models on who deploys the networks, who operates them, who uses them, and technical solutions even are different. What's the backhaul, what's the front haul solution? So it'll be a mix of resources brought together by different sets of stakeholders within the different places, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Finland, whether it's Spain, or whichever place. It'll be a different set of combinations of technologies, stakeholders, and even the business models can be different. And we need to provide those examples, those best practices to guide the development.
Good, thank you. I think that Dr. Henkel had a request in the word, please. Go ahead.
Very short comment. In addition to this introduction of Marja, I think we try to distribute different models of financing and also cooperation between private and public institutions by our BCO network workshops. For example, we have workshops and all regional and national BCOs in all European countries are invited to participate. And then during the next months, we are also publishing the new guide. We have an old guide with also where also many models are presented, but the updated models to cooperate concerning also the deployment of 5G will come to this or next month. Will be published a new guide for financing of broadband deployment, European-wide developed guide with all the experience and best practices we know. And so this is very important. As I said before, it's not only money we need also the knowledge to use the money, to implement the money. And this is the point of knowledge distributing, education, and I think it's very important to transport or distribute the knowledge to the local and regional administration, who is responsible at the end to build up these networks in rural areas. This is a very important task by the BCOs, by us, by researchers, by all people who have this knowledge. Thank you very much for the debate.
Great. Thank you very much for your insights, which are always welcome. So we will move to the. Did you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yes. We'll move to the. Now we can see you, Thomas. So welcome back into the screen. So before you have been, I would say, slightly talking also about technology, with type of different technologies you are using for this deployment, right? But one of the ideas is how do you have any KPI that helps you to assure that there is a good 5G development in these rural areas? Or could you tell a bit more what are the challenges that did you find and how did it solve them to overcome the problems you have? Because I think that you have done a very good work, you have a good coverage, so I'm sure that you have already faced this. This is something, I would say, a learning that you could share between us to better know, and what is the outcomes that you have achieved on those deployments you have already done. Know about what is the, I would say, the feelings of the people or the citizens, or maybe the regional areas that belong to these rural areas too.
So, I mean, the main KPIs which we are tracking is, of course, the coverage, and And as we are a combined fixed and mobile operator as an incumbent, we of course try to cover our active fixed-net customers also with 5G in order to allow this bonding technology. So we just follow the density of the distribution of those customers, and this is guiding us where to deploy 5G first in the rural areas. That's pretty straightforward, I would say. But of course, we also look at the competition, and actually we have one very active competitor also in the 5G area. They have achieved similar 5G coverage as we do, also a private company. And of course, we try to be competitive with their coverage. So that's another thing we observe, and that drives us as well. In terms of ambition, our ambition is by 2025 to have nationwide 5G coverage on the 3.5 band. So all the population, not area, that's pretty expensive with this high band, but from the households and businesses, we want to cover with 3.5 gig 5G all the households actually. Biggest challenges during that let's say rollout period, as I already mentioned, unfortunately, especially in the rural areas, the population has a lot of fear about adverse health effects of 5G, and there was a huge misinformation campaign, I would even say, on the social media starting in 2018-19, at the time when the spectrum was awarded. And we thought, it's again the same thing as with 4G or 3G, but we have underestimated the power of that. And the term 5G in Switzerland has, for half of the population, when we do surveys, a negative touch. So people just don't want 5G in their community. They don't want the antennas being upgraded, and they don't want to have new sites. And this is, we cannot just stop that. So we have information campaigns on ourselves initiated, but also, let's say, we support neutral entities, because people do not believe anymore what we are saying, that 5G is within the limits, is not dangerous. So I don't know how this, if it's that worse in other countries, but I know for sure in Germany, Austria, we have more or less the same developments. And I would encourage local authorities, but also governments to communicate very positively, proactively about 5G, to take the fears serious, but to push as much as information about facts and science-based things into the population. In Switzerland, our government is a little bit hesitating to doing that, and I think this is in Switzerland the biggest challenge. In terms of infrastructure, there was a question about fiber. Fiber connectivity to a 5G antenna is a must. This is a simple fact. Only in very, very few exceptional cases you could use a microwave link instead, but you need fiber. So that infrastructure must be there. We have financed it ourselves. 99% of the sites are fiber connected, so that's behind us. But in areas where this is not the case, that must be done. And if it cannot be done based on private investments, you must create somewhere a fund to do this. Otherwise, you cannot run 5G reasonably. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, very good. I think that you have made Dr. Henkel react. So go ahead, please. You have the turn for the answer.
No, only to add information on this, what Thomas said. This problem is not, it's very different in different countries in European-wide. There are countries like Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and Belgium, where we have, and France, where we have the problem of the can tell history and irrational misinformation and disinformation of the people, and we're fighting against on the European level since 1 year. We have also already disputed about our Blue website and many website of 5G website enlightenment and because there's so many studies worldwide that this is there's no reason for fear and there's no problem for the hearse. But we have to distribute this knowledge. And a good example, this is my tip for Thomas, is Belgium now, because Belgian government and the Belgian industry work together now to inform the people and to come over this handicap of disinformation. And perhaps you can learn from the Belgian example, because
we're actually in exchange with them.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. This was only my little tip.
But thanks. But you can do it. I mean, it starts very quickly, and you need to be proactive. That is my message in other countries. So you should not wait until it happened. You should start. And when I say government,
my girlfriend is living in Switzerland, and I have observed the development last year. You was the first with the best deployment. No, you can't use it, and nobody's using it because of this irrationality and the, you can say, superstition. This is kind of religion, more or less, wrong. And total irrational is no reason, and we have to fight against this, especially in some countries. It's very interesting to see which countries are covered. There are most countries of Europe are not covered by this problem. It's Germany, Switzerland, and Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, and France. These are the countries. The rest you will not find anywhere else in Europe such kind of problem. Not in the north, not in the south, not in the east. This is very interesting to see.
I think UK as well. They had some sabotage actions against antennas in the UK, but I think it was a peak, and they are back to normal.
So I can only thank you, all of you. Actually, if now I change my hat and I put my hat of CTIO of DIPLOCAT, that we are doing the implementation of the 5G rural strategy with the Catalan government, I would like to have you three as advisory members of this project to see what the insights you bring to have like an experience that can help to the deployment of this in the region, but we can talk about this later. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to share your points, to have your opinions, and I'm pretty much sure that the audience, who I also thanks to attend this workshop, have really enjoyed with your comments and insights. So again, thank you very much. And just to finish, I wish you a happy weekend and maybe to keep on thinking on the rural 5G strategies ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.